The Pacific, 1942. In the suffocating jungle darkness of Guadalcanal, Lieutenant Hiroshi Takeda led his platoon forward with absolute confidence. They had trained for this, the night assault, the bayonet charge, the moment when Japanese spirit would overcome American firepower. But then, cutting through the humid air, came a sound that would haunt survivors for the rest of their lives. Chak-chak, the unmistakable rack of a pump-action shotgun. In the next 2 seconds, Sergeant William Bull Hendricks unleashed 6 thunderous blasts that tore through the vegetation. 23 Japanese soldiers fell before they understood what had hit them. This wasn't in their training manuals. This wasn't supposed to exist on a modern battlefield. But it did, and it would rewrite everything they thought they knew about close combat. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. To understand why the shotgun became such a devastating surprise, you must first understand the philosophy that dominated Japanese military thinking in the early 1940s. The Imperial Japanese Army had built its entire tactical doctrine on a single unwavering principle: Seishin, the power of spirit over material motore. This wasn't mere propaganda designed to motivate troops. It was a calculated strategic response to a harsh industrial reality. By 1942, American steel production in a single month exceeded Japan's entire annual output by a factor of 17 to 1. The numbers were staggering and undeniable. While factories in Pittsburgh, Gary, and Detroit churned out tanks, artillery pieces, and ammunition around the clock, Japan's industrial capacity strained to equip even basic infantry units. General Hideki Yamashiro, one of the architects of Japanese infantry doctrine, wrote in a 1940 training manual, "When the enemy possesses superior firepower, the warrior spirit becomes the equalizing force. In the chaos of close combat, where machines cannot dominate, the disciplined soldier with unwavering resolve will prevail." This philosophy permeated every level of military training. Japanese infantry tactics emphasized aggressive night assaults, infiltration techniques, and above all, the bayonet charge. The Type 30 bayonet, at nearly 16 inches long, became a symbol of this doctrine. Soldiers spent hundreds of hours practicing bayonet drills, learning to thrust, parry, and move with deadly efficiency in close quarters. The belief was simple: if Japanese forces could close the distance and force hand-to-hand combat, their superior training and spiritual discipline would overcome any technological advantage. This doctrine had proven successful in multiple campaigns. In Manchuria, Chinese nationalist forces had repeatedly broken under the pressure of coordinated night attacks. In Malaya, British colonial troops, despite superior equipment, had been routed by Japanese infantry tactics that exploited darkness and terrain. In the Philippines during early 1942, American and Filipino defenders had been pushed back again and again by waves of Japanese soldiers who seemed willing to charge directly into machine gun fire. From the Japanese perspective, these victories validated their entire strategic philosophy. Spirit could indeed compensate for material disadvantage. The bayonet could defeat the bullet. Discipline and training could overcome industrial production. But hidden within this seemingly successful doctrine was a critical blind spot. Japanese tactical manuals meticulously cataloged every weapon they might face: the British Bren gun, the American Browning automatic rifle, the Thompson submachine gun, Soviet PP-SH-41s, even French mortars captured in Indochina. Training scenarios prepared soldiers for suppressive machine gun fire, artillery barrages, and coordinated rifle volleys. Not a single page mentioned the shotgun. To Japanese military planners, the shotgun was a civilian hunting weapon, something a farmer might use to shoot ducks or a sportsman might carry on a weekend excursion. It had no place in the taxonomy of modern military hardware. The weapons simply didn't exist in their conceptual framework of warfare. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Before we examine the weapon itself, we must grasp the staggering industrial gap that shaped every decision in the Pacific War. The numbers tell a story of two nations operating in completely different economic universes. In 1942, the United States produced 47 million tons of steel. Japan produced 2.8 million tons. American factories manufactured 24,000 tanks that year. Japan built 1,200. The United States launched 746 major naval vessels between 1941 and 1945. Japan launched 212. But perhaps most telling was small arms production. American industry churned out weapons with ruthless efficiency. The M1 Garand rifle, semi-automatic, 8-round capacity, rugged and reliable, rolled off production lines at a rate of 400,000 per year by 1943. Springfield Armory, Winchester, and other contractors produced these weapons in quantities that seemed almost wasteful by Japanese standards. Japan, meanwhile, struggled to produce enough basic Arisaka Type 99 rifles to equip frontline infantry units. Soldiers in second-line formations often carried outdated Type 38 rifles chambered in a different caliber. Some garrison troops made do with captured Chinese weapons. The industrial capacity simply didn't exist to modernize and standardize equipment across the entire military. This disparity forced Japanese strategic planners into a corner. They couldn't win a war of attrition. They couldn't match American production. Their only hope was to make every soldier count for more than his equipment, to create a multiplication factor through superior tactics, training, and morale. Thus, the doctrine of spirit wasn't just philosophy. It was necessity disguised as virtue. But America's industrial advantage went beyond mere quantity. It extended to variety and innovation. While Japan struggled to produce enough standard rifles, American arsenals simultaneously manufactured multiple weapon types: the M1 Garand rifle, the M1 carbine, the Thompson submachine gun, the Browning automatic rifle, the 30 caliber and 50 caliber machine guns, and yes, the humble 12-gauge shotgun. To American military planners, the shotgun was just another tool in an overflowing toolbox. Production numbers reflect this casual abundance. Winchester alone manufactured over 80,000 Model 12 shotguns for military use during the war. Remington, Stevens, Savage, and Ithaca added tens of thousands more. These weapons cost relatively little to produce, about $40 per unit compared to $85 for an M1 Garand, and manufacturing didn't strain industrial capacity. For Japan, the very concept was alien. Why would a modern military dedicate any production capacity to what was essentially a hunting weapon? Every rifle not produced was a soldier sent into battle under-equipped. Every ton of steel allocated to unnecessary weapons was a ton not available for aircraft or ships. The shotgun existed in a blind spot created by industrial scarcity. Japanese doctrine couldn't account for a weapon that only made sense in an economy of absolute abundance. The weapon that would shatter Japanese close combat doctrine had origins far removed from military battlefields. It emerged from the mind of America's most prolific firearms designer, John Moses Browning. Born in 1855 in Ogden, Utah, Browning revolutionized multiple weapon categories before turning to shotguns. His designs, most famously the Colt M1911 and the M1917 machine gun, favored mechanical simplicity, reliability, and mass producibility. In 1893, Browning produced a pump action for Winchester, and in 1897 he improved it into the Winchester Model 1897. The Model 97's simple, rugged action locked a trigger disconnector, allowing slam fire, holding the trigger down while cycling the pump to fire each fresh round. In skilled hands, 6 rounds could be discharged in under 2 seconds. Winchester marketed the gun to hunters and sportsmen. By 1914, over 700,000 had been sold. World War I introduced trench warfare's brutal close-quarters demands. Rifles proved ill-suited for 5-yard encounters. American commanders sought new tools, and the shotgun answered. The U.S. Army purchased thousands of Model 97s, shortening barrels to 20 inches, adding ventilated heat shields and bayonet lugs. These became trench guns. Their impact in French trenches was ferocious. A 12-gauge 00 buckshot shell carried 9.33 caliber pellets. At 10 yards, they spread roughly 10 inches. Missing was almost impossible. German forces, trained for methodical bolt-action fire, suddenly faced a weapon that could empty a magazine before they could chamber a second shot. After World War I, most military shotguns were returned or sold, but the design lineage continued. Winchester engineer Thomas Crossley Johnson refined Browning's ideas, producing the Model 12 in 1912. With an internal hammer and smoother action, the Model 12 improved handling and reliability and could also slam fire. By 1937, over 1 million Model 12s had been made. Police, hunters, and farmers adopted it widely. When the Pacific War erupted in December 1941, the Marine Corps reconsidered the shotgun for jungle combat. Specifications called for 12-gauge pump actions with 20-inch barrels, heat shields, bayonet lugs, and durable finishes. Between 1942 and 1945, tens of thousands of Model 97 and Model 12 combat shotguns and thousands more from Remington, Ithaca, Stevens, and Savage entered service. Technically simple but tactically potent, these shotguns used 00 buckshot or No. 4 buckshot, held 5 in the tubular magazine plus 1 in the chamber, and were capable of slam fire. Their effective patterns at typical jungle distances rendered precise aiming unnecessary. Training at Marine depots emphasized loading, slam-firing control, jam clearing, and maintenance in tropical conditions. Technical Manual TM9285 codified procedures. Its legacy endured. Limitations remained. Heavy ammunition reduced carried load, loud reports betrayed positions, limited range made them ineffective past 50 yards, and slam fire could empty magazines rapidly. Yet for point men, guards, Marine police, and pioneer units, the shotgun offered a unique blend of close-range firepower and intimidation. Thus, a tool shaped by hunters and refined by engineers became a decisive close-quarters weapon, born from Browning's simplicity and perfected through decades of use, and met Japanese soldiers who had neither trained for it nor expected its brutal efficiency.
August 7, 1942. The 1st Marine Division landed on Guadalcanal's beaches in the Solomon Islands, the first American offensive of World War II. The goal was clear: seize the nearly completed Japanese airfield and gain a foothold in the South Pacific. The initial landing met little resistance. Japanese construction crews fled into the jungle, and within hours, the airfield, soon renamed Henderson Field, was in American hands. But the easy success masked the storm about to break. Japanese commanders nearby reacted with outrage. Guadalcanal was a vital link in their defensive chain. Colonel Kiyoshi Nakamura was ordered to attack with 917 elite soldiers of the Ichiki detachment and retake the airfield in a single night assault. A veteran of China and the Philippines, Nakamura trusted in speed, discipline, and the power of the bayonet. His men would advance silently through the jungle, close within meters of the Marine lines, and overwhelm them in a sudden, ferocious charge. The Marines, however, had been busy. In the 2 weeks since the landing, they fortified their positions with barbed wire, sandbags, and interlocking fields of fire. Heavy Browning machine guns guarded the front, while scattered along the line, a few Marines held something different: Winchester Model 97 trench shotguns loaded with 00 buckshot. Private First Class Raymond Kowalski, a 20-year-old from Pennsylvania, manned one of those positions. He had wanted an M1 rifle, not a shotgun. His sergeant told him otherwise. In the dark, When they're right on top of you, this'll stop anything. Kowalski had trained for a week, learning to pump and fire with speed. That night, crouched behind sandbags, he waited in tense silence. Around 1:30 a.m., Lieutenant Frank Morrison spotted movement through binoculars. Hundreds of figures approaching shoulder to shoulder across the Ilu River, bayonets catching the moonlight. Morrison's gut turned cold. "Hold fire until they're at the wire," he ordered. The Japanese advanced with perfect discipline, cutting through the barbed wire. Nakamura's plan seemed to unfold flawlessly until Morrison shouted the command. The night erupted in fire. Browning machine guns tore through the ranks, tracers slicing the darkness. Dozens fell instantly, yet others charged forward. Then came a deeper sound. Boom! Kowalski's shotgun thundered, shredding 3 men with one blast. He pumped again. Boom! Chak-chak! Boom! 6 shots in under 2 seconds, every trigger pull dropping attackers who had reached the wire. All along the line, a same scene repeated. Where the enemy bunched at the obstacles, shotguns unleashed devastating bursts of close-range fire. One Japanese officer later wrote, "We expected rifles, machine guns, even artillery. But there was another sound, thunder that killed many men at once. We did not understand it." By dawn, the beachhead was littered with bodies. Of 917 Japanese soldiers, 789 were dead. The Marines lost 44. Official reports credited the machine guns and 37mm canister fire, barely noting the shotguns, effective for close defense, one line read. But among those who had fought, there was no doubt. The shotgun had filled the narrow gap between rifle and bayonet. A weapon dismissed as crude had become terrifyingly efficient. It shattered Japanese close combat doctrine that relied on courage and steel, proving that in modern war, raw bravery could not stand against concentrated firepower. For the Marines, Guadalcanal was only the beginning. For the shotgun, it was vindication. In the jungles ahead, it would prove again and again that at close range, nothing matched its brutal, thunderous efficiency.
If Guadalcanal had been the shotgun's baptism by fire, New Guinea would become its trial by water. From late 1942 through 1944, American and Australian forces fought one of the most punishing campaigns of the Pacific War across the island's mountains and jungles. The terrain was unforgiving. Steep ridges, endless rain, and humidity so heavy it turned everything to mildew and rust. For the soldiers, it was a constant struggle against the environment itself. And for the shotgun, the enemy wasn't Japanese firepower, but moisture. Corporal James "Red" Sullivan of the 32nd Infantry Division learned this the hard way in January 1943. A hunter from Oregon, he had volunteered to carry a Winchester Model 12, confident he knew its quirks. But within days of entering the jungle, his confidence turned to frustration. "I figured I knew shotguns, but nothing prepared me for that jungle," he wrote home. The rain never stopped. When it wasn't pouring, the air was so damp it might as well have been. American-issued shotgun shells at the time were made from paper hulls, perfectly serviceable for dry climates, but disastrous in tropical conditions. The cardboard absorbed moisture, swelling until the shells jammed in the chamber. Sullivan's first encounter with this came during a tense patrol along the Kokoda track. Spotting movement ahead, he raised his shotgun, only to find the shell stuck halfway. The swollen paper casing refused to chamber. "I stood there like an idiot with a club instead of a gun," he said. Across the front, soldiers improvised, wrapping shells in oilcloth, sealing them in wax, keeping them in pockets to stay warm. None of it worked for long. Technical Sergeant Robert Chen recorded the grim statistics. Up to 60% of shotgun shells failed after a week in the field. He urged immediate replacement with brass shells, but brass production lagged behind war priorities. The Army had warehouses full of paper hull ammunition, and the logistics system couldn't replace it overnight. The terrain compounded the problem. On the narrow, muddy Kokoda track, soldiers climbed mountains in pouring rain, each ounce of weight a burden. Rifle ammunition was lighter and more reliable. A soldier could carry 80 30-06 rounds for his M1 Garand in the same weight as 36 shotgun shells. When half those shells might not even fire, the shotgun became an expensive liability. By mid-1943, the weapons decline was obvious. Reports stopped mentioning it. In supply depots, unused shotguns gathered dust. Troops refused them. Private Anthony Rodriguez recalled, "The sergeant asked if anyone wanted a shotgun. Nobody raised a hand. We'd all heard the stories. It was dead weight." Australian troops saw the same issues. Captain William Fraser of the 2x14th Battalion wrote, "The concept is sound, the execution is flawed. In close jungle fighting, the spread is valuable, but the paper ammunition makes it useless." The statistics told the truth. Shipments of shotgun shells to New Guinea dropped by 70% between 1943 and 1944. Some units even shipped their weapons back to Australia, labeling them non-functional in current environment. The tragedy was bureaucratic as much as climatic. Brass shells existed, but shotgun ammunition was low on the ordnance priority list, below rifles, artillery, and vehicle parts. The shotgun, less than 2% of infantry weapons, simply wasn't worth the retooling effort. For soldiers, the consequence was trust lost. Sergeant Michael O'Brien, a veteran of Guadalcanal, summed it up. "On Guadalcanal, the shotgun was a monster. In New Guinea, it was dead weight. You couldn't trust the ammo. I'd rather carry a .45 that I knew would fire." The shotgun's failure in New Guinea taught an enduring lesson. Firepower means nothing without reliability. The weapon that had terrified the Japanese at Alligator Creek was beaten not by superior tactics, but by humidity, paper, and bureaucracy. The jungle had claimed another victim. Not a man, but a myth of invincibility.
February 1945. General Douglas MacArthur had kept his promise. I shall return. American forces were back in the Philippines, advancing toward Manila, the capital, symbol of liberation, and a city of 800,000 civilians trapped between two armies. Japanese Rear Admiral Sanji Iwabuchi commanded roughly 16,000 troops, naval personnel, army stragglers, and militia. His orders were clear: defend Manila to the last man. Every building became a fortress, every street a killing ground. For the U.S. 6th Army, the dense, close-quarters combat seemed ideal for the shotgun. The Winchester Model 12, with its wide spread and instant stopping power, appeared tailor-made for urban warfare. Staff Sergeant Harold Thompson of the 37th Infantry Division was issued one. A veteran of jungle fighting, he wasn't convinced. "I'd seen shotguns work in ambushes," he said, "but in a city fight, I wasn't sure which version of the shotgun we'd get." The battle for Manila began on February 3rd and became the Pacific's most savage urban engagement. The Japanese fortified buildings with sandbags and mines, turning homes into bunkers. American tactics adapted. Tanks and engineers supported infantry squads as they advanced building by building. Blast the doors, throw grenades, then storm inside. Thompson's first assault followed the textbook. His squad approached a 3-story house turned strongpoint. A Sherman tank blasted the ground floor. Engineers blew the door. Inside, smoke and dust cut visibility to 10 feet. A Japanese soldier appeared in a doorway. Thompson fired. Boom! The man dropped instantly. 12 feet away, the .00 buckshot pattern was wide enough to ensure a fatal hit. Another soldier charged from the stairwell. Boom! And fell. 2 shots, 2 kills. The shotgun worked perfectly, until its limits appeared. Thompson had fired a third of his ammunition. Reloading under fire meant fumbling heavy shells one by one into the magazine tube while riflemen beside him fired clip after clip. Upstairs, a grenade exploded, showering shrapnel. He reloaded and moved on. By the time the squad cleared the building 40 minutes later, Thompson had fired 14 rounds and killed 5 defenders. His riflemen had killed more with their Garans, and the bar gunner more still. The real killers, however, were the tank's 75mm shells, grenades, and satchel charges. The shotgun was deadly in moments, but the battle was about firepower and endurance. Across Manila, after-action reports told the same story. The shotgun excelled in brief close-quarters encounters, but lacked range and ammunition for sustained combat. The weapons that truly broke Japanese resistance were flamethrowers, demolitions, and tank guns. The M2 flamethrower, projecting burning fuel 40 yards, cleared entire buildings where shotguns could not. "Shotguns have limited utility in urban operations," wrote Lieutenant Colonel Robert Howard. "Effective range too short, ammunition capacity insufficient. Prioritize flamethrowers and tank support." A rifleman could carry 100 rounds of 30-06, a submachine gunner 200 of 45 ACP. A shotgunner could carry only 30 to 40 shells, barely enough for one building. Private First Class Daniel Kowalski, whose brother had used a shotgun at Guadalcanal, found it less useful in Manila. In the jungle, 6 rounds in 6 seconds ended the fight. In Manila, you might fight for an hour. 6 rounds was nothing. Statistics told the truth. During the month-long battle, American divisions fired over 2.3 million rifle rounds, 450,000 submachine gun rounds, and 27,000 gallons of flamethrower fuel, but only 8,000 shotgun shells. The weapon was there, but barely noticeable amid the thunder of tanks and artillery. Civilians hiding through the carnage recalled that distinctive boom, rare, startling, 1 for every 100 rifle shots. The psychological edge that had terrified Japanese troops at Guadalcanal had vanished in the chaos of urban war. When Manila fell on March 3, 1945, the city was destroyed and over 100,000 civilians lay dead. The shotgun had proven useful in moments, but irrelevant in scale. It could save a man's life in a hallway, but it couldn't win a city. Sergeant Thompson survived the battle and kept his shotgun to war's end. He said, "I was glad to have it in my hands sometimes, but if you asked me what won Manila, I'd say tanks, flamethrowers, and a lot of brave men with rifles. The shotgun was just along for the ride." April 1, 1945, the largest amphibious assault of the Pacific War began as the U.S. 10th Army, 2 Marine and 4 Army divisions landed on Okinawa. More than 180,000 Americans faced over 100,000 Japanese defenders and tens of thousands of Okinawan militia. The battle would last 82 days and claim 12,500 American lives. For the shotgun, Okinawa was a bitter irony. Just 3 days before the invasion, the U.S. military finally solved its long-standing ammunition problem. On March 29th, it adopted the M19 brass shot shell, moisture-proof, reliable, and immune to the tropical humidity that had ruined paper shells since Guadalcanal. It was exactly what the weapon had needed since 1942, arriving just in time to be irrelevant. Staff Sergeant William Parker of the 1st Marine Division was among the first to receive the gleaming brass shells aboard the transport ship. "Finally," he said, "maybe now this thing will actually work." It would work perfectly, but in a battle where the shotgun itself no longer mattered. The Japanese commander, General Mitsuru Ushijima, had withdrawn his forces from the beaches to a fortified defensive line anchored on Shuri Castle. The Marines came ashore unopposed, then marched into the strongest defensive system yet built in the Pacific. Concrete bunkers, interlocked cave networks, artillery hidden behind ridgelines. Okinawa was a fortress. By the time Parker's unit reached the Shuri line in mid-April, machine gun fire raked open fields and artillery poured from invisible slopes. The shotgun's 30-yard reach was meaningless. "The ammunition worked great," Parker said later, But working shells don't matter when you're fighting the wrong war. Officially, the 2 Marine divisions carried about 600 shotguns. The 4 Army divisions, perhaps 1,500 in total, the greatest number yet deployed in a single Pacific battle. Yet, in the after-action reports, they all but disappeared. The weapons that mattered were overwhelming. Artillery, firing 2.9 million shells over 82 days, an average of 35,000 per day. Flamethrower tanks, whose armored hulls and 75-yard streams of fire burned out bunkers no shotgun could touch. Naval gunfire, which leveled entire ridgelines. Aircraft dropping napalm and bombs in relentless close air support. The shotgun belonged to none of these categories. It could not suppress, penetrate, or destroy. Its role had shrunk to rear echelon tasks, guarding prisoners, controlling civilians, and night sentry work. Private First Class Robert Morrison, assigned to guard Okinawan civilians, carried one throughout the campaign but never fired it. He said, "It looked intimidating, and if I did have to fire, the spread meant I wouldn't hit someone by mistake, but I was nowhere near the real fighting." The M19 shells worked flawlessly, but too late. The battle's ranges, terrain, and firepower rendered the shotgun tactically invisible. Even Japanese reports captured after the war made no mention of it. They described their fear of flamethrowers, artillery, and tanks, but never the shotgun. The ammunition statistics make its absence plain. 31 million rounds of rifle ammunition, 2 million rounds of pistol and SMG ammo, 2.9 million artillery shells, 600,000 gallons of flamethrower fuel, and countless grenades and mortar rounds. Shotgun shells? Not recorded. Sergeant Thomas Kowalski of the 96th Infantry Division recalled most of the shotguns stayed at the company CP. Nobody wanted to carry them, they were just extra weight. Okinawa's brutal arithmetic made that decision easy. Every pound mattered. A man could carry rifle ammo, grenades, or water. Or shotgun shells he'd likely never fire. Only in cave-clearing operations did the weapon find fleeting purpose. Marines would toss grenades, blast flames inside, then cautiously, a few men might enter with shotguns, just in case. "If anything's alive after 6 grenades and a flame burst, we've done something wrong," one lieutenant wrote. When Okinawa ended on June 21, 1945, the cost was staggering. 49,000 American casualties, 77,000 Japanese dead, and more than 100,000 Okinawan civilians killed. In that ocean of fire and blood, the shotgun left no trace. It had finally received the perfect ammunition, but at the wrong time, in the wrong war, on the wrong island. The M19 brass shell worked flawlessly. The weapon itself no longer had a purpose. Beyond the battlefield, the shotgun's real story appears in logistics, the ledgers and requisitions that show what the military truly valued. The 1943 Marine Division Table of Organization and Equipment authorized 306 shotguns, compared with 9,515 Garand rifles, 1,282 carbines, 313 BARs, and 654 Thompsons. Barely 1.8% of small arms. The message was clear, useful but dispensable. A division could fight without shotguns. Without rifles, it couldn't. Ammunition confirmed the same logic. A .306 cartridge weighed 26 grams. 80 rounds weighed about 2 kilograms. A 12-gauge shell weighed 54 grams. 80 rounds topped 4.3 kilograms and took 3 times the space. Marines rarely carried more than 30 to 40 shells, leaving them with a fraction of a rifleman's sustained firepower. Every extra kilogram mattered on Pacific beaches and ridges. Ship-in constraints amplified the issue. Ammunition manifests for 1944 Marine divisions typically listed 2 million rifle rounds, 500,000 pistol/Serb gun rounds, and 300,000 for machine guns, but only 15,000 to 20,000 shotgun shells, often marked "if space available."
Running short on .306 was a crisis. Running short on shotgun shells was an inconvenience. Maintenance priorities matched their status. Rifles and automatics had detailed manuals, armorers, and spare parts. The shotgun's TM-9285 was a slim pamphlet. Few replacement parts existed in the field. If one broke, it was sent to the rear. Distribution patterns confirmed the weapon's secondary role. Of 306 shotguns in a Marine division, most went to military police, pioneer, and headquarters guards, not to frontline rifle companies, which averaged only 4 to 6 guns, often held in reserve. The shotgun was for prisoners, patrols, and security, not assault. Production numbers reinforced its marginality. Between 1941 and 1945, U.S. industry made 4.5 million Garans, 6.2 million carbines, 1.5 million Thompsons, 350,000 BARs, and just 140 to 160,000 shotguns, about 1 to 1.5% of total small arms output. Many stayed stateside for police or base security. Far fewer reached the Pacific. By 1944-45, field requisitions for more shotguns had largely vanished. The new M19 brass shell of March 1945 finally solved moisture issues, but too late to change anything. Reliable ammunition couldn't fix limited tactical value. Even in loss reports, the difference was stark. A rifle demanded urgent replacement. A shotgun rarely did. Logistics exposed the truth combat lore sometimes blurred. The shotgun was never decisive. It was a niche tool, adequate but expendable, whose absence would not have altered the war's outcome.
Perhaps the most revealing evidence of the shotgun's real impact comes not from reports or logistics, but from memory. What the men who fought chose to remember. Eugene Sledge's With the Old Breed, one of the definitive Pacific War memoirs, spans more than 300 pages of brutal detail from Peleliu and Okinawa. He describes rifles, bars, Thompsons, flamethrowers, mortars, and artillery, but never once mentions a shotgun. Robert Leckey's Helmet for My Pillow omits it as well. The same silence echoes across dozens of first-hand accounts. From over 4,000 Pacific War interviews in the Veterans History Project, weapon references appear in predictable patterns. M1 Garand, 68%. Bar, 45%. Thompson, 38%. Flamethrower, 52%. Shotgun, just 4%. And even those brief mentions are casual. Some guys had them. I saw one once. Rarely does a veteran describe actually using one in combat. Memory by nature preserves what mattered, what saved lives or inspired fear. The shotgun barely registered. Private First Class George Parnell, who fought at Tarawa, Saipan, and Tinian, recalled, "The rifle saved my life more times than I can count." When asked about shotguns, he hesitated. MPs, maybe? I don't remember seeing them in combat. Staff Sergeant Raymond Chen was more direct. The shotgun? Fine for what it was. But in the jungle, you wanted range and firepower. The Garand gave you both. The shotgun was like bringing a pocket knife to a sword fight. Those who praised it usually served in non-combat roles. Technical Sergeant Frank Morrison called it perfect for guarding prisoners and civilians, intimidating, safe, and simple, but he admitted, "I wasn't fighting battles." Even frontline veterans mocked its usefulness. Corporal Daniel Kowalski remembered, before Peleliu, the supply sergeant asked if anyone wanted a shotgun. The new guys raised their hands. The veterans laughed. On Peleliu, you needed a rifle. The shotgun was dead weight. This collective silence speaks volumes. To veterans, the shotgun was peripheral, rarely carried, rarely fired, rarely remembered. Yet popular culture would later elevate it into an icon of the Pacific War. Films and games glorified the pump-action chak-chak, but the men who lived it remembered something else entirely. The ping of the Garand, the roar of the bar, the thunder of artillery. The myth endured, but the memory did not. How did a weapon that made up less than 2% of Marine firearms, left almost no mark in logistics, and barely appeared in veteran memoirs, become an icon of Pacific War combat? The answer lies in post-war myth-making, Hollywood, popular literature, and America's hunger for heroic imagery. In the late 1940s and 1950s, Hollywood turned the Pacific War into vivid spectacle. Directors needed weapons that looked dramatic on screen, and the pump-action shotgun, with its muscular design and distinctive sound, fit perfectly. It was visually dynamic, instantly recognizable, and deeply American, evoking hunting and frontier toughness. Films like Sands of Iwo Jima, 1949, and Halls of Montezuma, 1950, cemented the image of the shotgun-wielding Marine. John Wayne's iconic roles amplified it, transforming the weapon into a cinematic shorthand for courage and grit. In truth, wartime footage shows Marines overwhelmingly armed with M1 Garands, not shotguns, but audiences accepted the myth because it felt authentic. Pulp magazines and men's adventure books of the 1950s to 70s reinforced the image, depicting Marines blasting through jungles at close range. Even serious histories sometimes echoed the exaggeration, because a lone Marine with a shotgun made for better storytelling than industrial firepower and logistics. The Cold War further elevated the shotgun's symbolic value. It embodied American ingenuity, a civilian hunting gun turned into a weapon of war. For recruiters and filmmakers, it projected toughness and individuality, the traits Americans wanted to believe had won the war. By the 1970s, the myth had hardened. Video games in the 1990s and 2000s revived it for new generations, portraying the shotgun as a devastating, indispensable weapon. Game design required it to be powerful, ensuring players would use it, at the expense of historical truth. The Internet only deepened the misconception. Forums repeated apocryphal stories, like the claim that Japan protested U.S. shotgun use, a confusion from World War I Germany that never occurred in World War II. Such tales endured because they made the weapon seem formidable. Today, most Americans still imagine Marines storming beaches with shotguns. The reality, that the shotgun was a niche weapon, rarely used or remembered, fades behind decades of cultural storytelling. In war's collective memory, myth often triumphs over fact, and the Pacific shotgun remains one of its clearest examples. Step back from individual weapons and tactical details, and the Pacific War's true nature comes into sharp focus. This was never a conflict that would be decided by any single weapon system, no matter how innovative or effective. It was a war of industrial capacity, strategic depth, and combined arms coordination on a scale that dwarfed any individual component. The numbers tell a story that no amount of tactical ingenuity could overcome. By 1943, American shipyards were producing one aircraft carrier every month. Japanese industry struggled to replace carriers sunk in battle. American factories manufactured 300,000 aircraft during the war. Japan produced roughly 76,000. This disparity manifested in every aspect of the conflict. While debates occurred about whether shotguns or rifles were more effective in jungle combat, American industry was building the vast fleet that would island hop across the Pacific, cutting Japanese positions off from resupply and reinforcement. The strategic reality was simple. Japan could not win a war of attrition against American industrial might. Every carrier sunk, every aircraft destroyed, every trained pilot killed represented an irreplaceable loss for Japan. America could absorb losses and replace them faster than they occurred. Consider the naval dimension. The Battle of Midway in June 1942 cost Japan 4 fleet carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu. These represented a substantial portion of Japan's carrier force, and replacing them was effectively impossible given Japan's industrial limitations. By contrast, when the USS Lexington was sunk at the Battle of the Coral Sea in May 1942, American shipyards already had multiple fleet carriers under construction. The USS Essex, commissioned in December 1942, was the first of 24 Essex-class carriers that would be completed during the war. Japan simply couldn't compete at that scale. This industrial advantage extended to every weapons category. American factories produced 88,410 tanks and self-propelled guns. Japan, 2,515. 157,000 American naval vessels of every type. 257,390 artillery pieces. Japan, 13,350. 2,434,000 military trucks. Japan, 165,000. 11.2 million rifles and carbines. Japan, approximately 3.5 million. In this context, whether Marines carried shotguns or not was strategically meaningless. The shotgun debate was a tactical footnote in a strategic drama being decided by factory output, shipyard capacity, and resource extraction. The weapons that truly shaped the Pacific War were those that leveraged American advantages. Naval aviation. American carrier task forces could project power across thousands of miles, striking Japanese positions while remaining beyond the range of retaliation. The combination of numerous carriers, well-trained pilots, and effective aircraft like the F-6F Hellcat created air superiority that Japan couldn't contest by 1944. Submarine warfare. American submarines devastated Japanese merchant shipping, cutting supply lines to isolated island garrisons. By 1945, Japan's economy was strangling due to lack of raw material imports. Submarines accounted for 55% of Japanese shipping losses, roughly 5 million tons sunk. Amphibious warfare. The ability to land large forces on defended beaches, supported by naval gunfire and air support, allowed Americans to choose where and when to fight. Japan had to defend everywhere. America could concentrate force anywhere. This strategic flexibility was decisive. Combined arms coordination. American forces integrated infantry, armor, artillery, air support, and naval gunfire into coordinated assaults. This required extensive communication networks, trained liaison officers, and logistics systems that Japan couldn't match. Within this broader context, individual infantry weapons, whether shotguns, rifles, or machine guns, were relevant only at the tactical level of individual battles. Strategic outcomes were determined by factors several levels above: which side controlled the seas, who had air superiority, whose industry could sustain the war effort. The shotgun could win a firefight in a jungle clearing. It couldn't sink a Japanese destroyer, shoot down a Zero fighter, or sustain a logistics network across thousands of miles of ocean. Those capabilities won the war. Even at the tactical level, the weapons that mattered most were those that enabled combined arms operations. Artillery was critical. American forces fired millions of shells during the war, suppressing enemy positions and enabling infantry advances. Without artillery support, infantry assaults against prepared positions became suicidal. Flamethrowers, particularly tank-mounted versions, proved essential for reducing fortified positions. The M4A3R3 Zippo tank, equipped with a flamethrower, could destroy bunkers that would otherwise require hours of assault and significant casualties. Close air support evolved throughout the war, with Marine and Navy aircraft learning to coordinate with ground forces. By 1945, infantry units could call in airstrikes with remarkable precision, using aircraft as flying artillery to destroy targets beyond the reach of ground-based weapons. In this ecosystem of coordinated firepower, the infantry squad's small arms were one small component. Whether that squad carried shotguns or not was tactically relevant in specific circumstances, but strategically irrelevant to the war's outcome. The final months of the war illustrated this reality starkly. The firebombing campaigns against Japanese cities, culminating in the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, demonstrated how industrial strategic factors had completely transcended tactical considerations. The war was decided by B-29 bombers flying from the Marianas Islands, not by infantry weapons choices on jungle battlefields. Japan surrendered, not because American soldiers had superior rifles or shotguns, but because continuation of the war meant complete national destruction. Soviet entry into the war and the prospect of invasion from two directions, combined with the demonstrated ability of American aircraft to destroy Japanese cities at will, made further resistance pointless. In the final accounting, the shotgun's contribution to this vast strategic drama was minimal. It was a footnote in a story written by aircraft carriers, submarines, strategic bombers, and the vast industrial capacity that produced them all. This doesn't diminish the experiences of individual Marines who used shotguns effectively in specific engagements. For Sergeant Kowalski at Guadalcanal, the shotgun absolutely mattered. It helped him survive a desperate night battle. For individual soldiers, in particular circumstances, the weapon had genuine value. But wars aren't won by individual weapons in individual engagements. They're won by systems, industrial systems, logistical systems, strategic systems that coordinate thousands of components into effective military power. The shotgun was one tiny component in that vast system. It played its minor role adequately, but never rose to strategic significance. And in the ultimate test, did it change the war's outcome? The answer is clearly no. How did a weapon that made up less than 2% of infantry arms become an enduring symbol of Pacific War combat? The answer lies not on the battlefield, but in the realm of cultural memory. Hollywood, pulp fiction, and later, video games. After 1945, filmmakers faced the challenge of making the war visually compelling. The pump-action shotgun, with its dynamic motion and distinct appearance, offered instant cinematic appeal. Movies like Sands of Iwo Jima, 1949, and Halls of Montezuma, 1950, turned it into a visual shorthand for Marine toughness. John Wayne's on-screen image, jaw set, shotgun pumping through jungle smoke, cemented the weapon's mythic status. Viewers came to believe that Marines and shotguns defined Pacific combat, even though historical records showed the M1 Garand overwhelmingly dominated the battlefield. Pulp magazines and adventure novels of the 1950s to 1970s amplified the myth, portraying shotguns as devastating close combat tools that could clear a bunker with one blast. These images served cultural needs more than historical accuracy, offering audiences a story about American ingenuity and grit. The truth that victory came through industrial power, logistics, and combined arms coordination was less dramatic and harder to dramatize. By the time video games like Call of Duty and Medal of Honor arrived, the legend was firmly entrenched. Digital Marines charging through jungles with shotguns reinforced the same Hollywood-born narrative. Gameplay balance demanded that the weapon be powerful and common, teaching new generations a stylized history where shotguns rivaled rifles in importance. In reality, the shotgun's role was small but specific, effective for close-quarters defense and jungle skirmishes, yet peripheral to the broader war effort. Veterans rarely mentioned it, and logistic records list it as a minor category of arms issued. The myth of its dominance, however, grew precisely because it symbolized qualities Americans wanted to remember: practicality, adaptability, and the belief that courage and ingenuity could overcome any foe.
The contrast reveals how societies remember war, not through statistics, but through symbols that reflect cultural identity. The mythic shotgun fits an American narrative of resourceful citizens transforming a hunting tool into a weapon of victory. The historical shotgun, by contrast, represents a modest instrument in a vast industrial war machine that won through factories, fleets, and supply lines, not individual weapons. Today, advertisements still call the shotgun combat-proven in World War II. Families cherish heirlooms said to have won the Pacific. Yet the truth is simpler. Shotguns served honorably in limited roles, but victory belonged to logistics, air power, and production, not individual weapons. The shotgun's paradox endures. Tactically minor, strategically irrelevant, yet culturally immortal. It reminds us that in public memory, what mattered most isn't always what truly made the difference. History seeks truth, memory seeks meaning, and sometimes meaning wins. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.